Sponsored by Rabbi Shlomi and Mirla Greenwald. This is a Sicha from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Alef, Parshas Vayakhel Sicha Beis, and the topic of the Sicha is that in this week's Parsha we learned the pasuk of Vayas Betzalel Esa Oren, and Betzalel made the Oren, and the Rashi on it. And there are 4 parts in the Sicha. The Rebbe will, number 1, ask 2 questions on Rashi. Number 2, present and explain an earlier Rashi. Number 3, based on this explanation of the earlier Rashi, answer the 2 questions on our Rashi here. And number 4, present the Yenish al Torah in Rashi. On the pasuk in our parsha, where it says Vayas Betzalel es ha'aron v'gemer, and Betzalel made the aron, so Rashi quotes the words Vayas Betzalel, and Rashi explains Lefi shenosa nafshay al hamalocha yoser mishar chachamim, because he gave his nefesh for the malacha more than the remaining chachamim, so therefore Nikras al Shmai, it's called by his name. Now it's understood that the intent of Rashi is to answer a simple question that arises here, and that is, what was different about the making of the Aron that specifically here the Torah tells us that Betzalel made it, unlike all the other Kalim where it just says Vayas and it doesn't tell us who made it. And Rashi answers this question by saying that because he gave his nefesh for this work of making the Aron more than the remaining Chachamim, therefore Nikras al Shmai, it's called by his name. And there are 2 questions on this Rashi. Number 1, it's understood that not each of the Chachmei Lev that was involved in the building of the Mishkan and making the Kalim was able to participate in every detail of the making of the Mishkan, but rather each one did their own part. And if that's the case, so why not explain the pasuk literally that Betzalel actually made the Aron? Why does Rashi have to explain it that because he gave from his nefesh for the work of the Aron more than everyone else, that's why it's called by his name? Why don't we say, why doesn't Rashi explain that he actually made the Aron like it says in the pasuk? And even though Betzalel is the head of all the Chachmei Lev, as it says that he was filled with chachma, to be able to do in all the malechas machshavas, and he was also the one that instructed the other Chachmei Lev. So even though, as such, he participated in making all the kalim, but we can explain that by the Aron, which is the most important of all of the kalim, he did it entirely on his own. So since he was the greatest of all of them, and the Aron is the most important of all the kalim, so therefore, by the Aron specifically, Betzalel did it entirely on his own. So why don't we learn it that way? Why doesn't Rashi learn it that way? That Vayas Betzalel Aron means literally that Betzalel actually made the Aron. And the second question is, since the pasuk says Vayas Betzalel, so why does Rashi change and say Lefi shenosa nafshay al hamalacha? Rashi should have written Lefi shenosa nafshay al ha'asiyah. Why does Rashi use the word malacha and not the word asiyah, which is used in the pasuk? The key to answering these 2 questions on Rashi is understanding an earlier teaching of Rashi. So this will be understood by first returning to an earlier teaching of Rashi in Parshas Truma regarding the Kapiris Aron. Rashi says about the Kapiris on top of the Aron, Va'afal pi shalei nosan shir la'ovya, even though the Torah did not give a measurement to its thickness, Perashur Rabbeinu, shahaya ovya tefach, that its thickness was a tefach. And the question is, why does Rashi tell us the thickness of the Kapiris, which he doesn't do with any of the other kalim? And this question is especially since there's no proof to it in Pshuta Shemikra, and it must come from Perashur Rabbeinu. So why does Rashi tell it to us? And the answer is that with this, Rashi is answering why the Torah changes from the norm, and it says va'asu by making the Aron, unlike by all the other kalim where it says va'asisa. Why does the Torah switch from va'asisa, which means and you singular should make this kli or this beged, and by the Aron it switches to say va'asu and they plural should make it? Now we're going to address one point over here, and that is that when it says Vasisa, it doesn't mean that Moshe should make it specifically himself. For it's understood that Vasisa doesn't mean literally that Moshe himself should make it, which is impossible. It's impossible for one person to make all the Kalim and all the Begadim. Also, it clearly says, Va'asa Betzalel Va'aliyah V'chol Ish Chacham Lev. So obviously it doesn't mean Vasisa, you Moshe. And thirdly, and even more so, Rashi says, Shaloi Asa Moshe Shum Malacha B'Mishkan. Moshe didn't participate in making any of the Malacha in the Mishkan. And so it must mean that Moshe only gave over the command. So the question is, why does the Torah switch from Va'asisa, which it uses by the making of the other Kalim and the Begadim, to Va'asu? One point over here is that this idea that when it says Va'asisa can mean to give over the command, we find it elsewhere as well. Like for example, it says Vayihi Boine'ir, and Rashi explains that's Vayihi Kayin Boine'ir. Cain built a city. Now, obviously, Cain did not build the whole city. Rather, it means that he gave over the instructions. So also here, when it says Vasisa, it means to give over the instructions. So if it means to give it over to others, why does the Torah switch by the making of the Aron and say Va'asu? It's going from the singular to the plural. And because of this, so we must say it's teaching us that the Aron was unable to be made by one person. And the explanation for why it can't be made by one person is what Rashi is providing us when he says that the thickness was a tefach. And the explanation is that the kaparis was a tefach thick, which one person is unable to work with such an item alone. A person can't work with a piece of gold that's a tefach thick, the size of the kaparis. And so Rashi tells us the thickness of the kaparis in order to explain and answer to us why it says va'asu by the Aron. Because the Aron could only be made by a rabbim, not by one person. There had to be other people involved, not just one person. Now, regarding the crushim, we know they couldn't be lifted by one person, but that's only regarding the crushim when it comes to lifting them up and building the Mishkan. But they could be made by one person while they're lying on the ground, which is not the case by the kaparis, especially because when it comes to the kaparis, part of making the kaparis in the urn is placing the kaparis on top of the urn, which certainly one person alone is unable to do that, to pick up the kaparis and place it on top of the urn. So now we understand why Rashi tells us the thickness of the kaparis. It's in order to answer the question of why did the Torah switch by the making of the urn to say va'asu, unlike what it says by all the other kelim and gadim, where it says va'asisa. Based on this, we can now answer the questions on our Rashi here. So based on this, when in our Parsha it says Vayas Betzalel Sa'aron V'Gemer, and it simply means that Betzalel made the Aron himself, the question arises that we learn that it is made through a rabbim, like it says V'asu. And more importantly, it's not just that technically the instruction was that it should be made through a rabbim, but that it's impossible for one person to make it. And because of this, therefore Rashi explains that it means therefore Nikras al Shmei. Not because he actually built it, because that's impossible, but rather because he was Moiser Nafshay on the work of the Aron more than the other Chamim. Therefore Nikras al Shmei. And since all the Chachmei Lev dedicated themselves to the work, and so the question is, why is it called by his name? So therefore Rashi adds on, not just Lefi Shenosan Nafshay Alam Locha. He also says Yosim Mishar Chachamim. So that explains to us why Rashi explains the pasuk to mean not that he actually built it himself, because that's impossible, but rather that it was because Moser Nafshay Alam Locha. And the reason it's him and not the others, because by him it was Yosim Mishar Chachamim. However, the question is then the opposite. Since the main greatness of Betzalel was Ulahiris Nasan Belibay, that he oversaw everything, he was the teacher of the Chachmei Lev in each and every malacha, every detail he had to oversee, like we mentioned earlier. So certainly he did this with all the Kalim. And if that's the case, why is it only emphasized by the Aron? And therefore Rashi uses the word hamalacha and not asiyah, because asiyah includes all aspects that are part of completing something. When we say asiyah, it means everything that's involved in the making of the thing, including the learning about it, and not just the labor itself. And we find this in Rashi by the Bria Sa'ilam. Twice we have the word vayas, and once Rashi says tiknai al omdai, another time he says tiknam b'tzavyenim uvekemasam, which means it involves all the details of making it, not just the physical part. Setting it up, establishing it, every aspect is included in Vayas. Whereas Malacha means the labor of doing something. And this we also see in another place. Rashi says that Hiktim, this is the beginning of Parshas Vayakhel. It says, Hiktim lem azar Shabbos letzivui melechas hamishkan, loimer she'enei deichas Shabbos. It tells us that the melechas hamishkan is not deichas Shabbos. And the question is, there are aspects of the melechas hamishkan that are deichas Shabbos. For example, learning about it. And the answer is that it doesn't say asiyas hamishkan, which it could include learning about it. It says melechas hamishkan. Melechas hamishkan refers to the physical labor. And so Rashi tells us the word hamalacha to tell us that what's unique over here is that, of course, with all the other kelim, Betzalel was very involved. But what was special over here, and so the specialness in this nafshe of Betzalel by the Aron extended all the way to the labor itself. And that's why Rashi uses the word hamalacha to explain to us what's unique about Betzalel's involvement specifically by the Aron. By the other things, it could have been that he oversaw it, that he gave instructions and guidance, and he guided the process. But when it came to the Aron, it extended all the way to the malacha, to the labor itself. And because of that, that's why the Torah says, Vayas Betzalel as Aron. It says the name of Betzalel. From Yenishal Torah and Rashi, the koyach of Mesiras Nefesh is above all the koyachs of a person, both the koyachs makifim and the koyachs primim. However, the ultimate purpose is that the koyach of Mesiras Nefesh should permeate and penetrate all the koyachs of a person, all the way to the lowest of all the koyachs, the koyach ha'maisa. And Rashi hints to this in the Mesiras Nefesh of Betzalel by saying Lefi Shenasa Nafshay, which is the idea of Mesiras Nefesh ala malacha, which means it goes all the way down to the koyach ha'maisa. So the Yenishal Torah is this idea that the goal of the Mesiras Nefesh is that it should reach all the way down into every one of the person's koyachs, even and all the way to the koyach ha'maisa. And through this, when this happens, that a person brings the koyach of Mesiras Nefesh all the way down to the Maisa, not only do all the koyachs operate in a different way because they are now being animated by the Mesiras Nefesh that's inside of them, but they themselves become uplifted to a higher level. The koyachs themselves become different koyachs. It's not just that they're being imposed upon by the Mesiras Nefesh of the person, but they actually become uplifted on their own. And Rashi hints to this in the words, Yaiser Mishar Chachamim, that all the koyachs, including the highest of them, which is the koyach of Chachma, are uplifted to a higher level. They're Yaiser Mishar Chachamim. It gets uplifted to a higher level. And this is also understood from the saying of Ein Chacham Kabbalah Nisayan, that through an Nisayan that actually happens, it actually elevates the Chachma of a person. And Rashi concludes Nikris al Shmai, that because of this Nikris al Shmai, meaning that all of this is accomplished because through the Mesiras Nefesh we draw down the level of Keser. That's what Nikris. Nikris means to draw down, which is higher than all the spheres. Keser, the word Shmai, when it says Nikris al Shmai, so Nikris means to draw down. Shmai refers to Keser, and Keser is higher than all the spheres, and it has an impact on them, and therefore it does the same thing with the koyachs of a person which come from the spheres. So when a person draws down the level of Keser, and the level of Keser impacts all the spheres that are beneath it, this also causes that it impacts the koyachs of a person which come from the spheres. And this koyach of Mesiras Nefesh came to Betzalel as a Yerusha from his grandfather Chur, that he had Mesiras Nefesh to stop the Chet HaEgel, which the Chet HaEgel is the opposite of V'shachanti B'Seicham. Meaning, what are we saying here? That Chur had Mesiras Nefesh for V'shachanti B'Seicham. We know that the Chet HaEgel is the opposite of V'shachanti B'Seicham, and therefore the kapara for the Chet HaEgel was the Mishkan, the V'shachanti B'Seicham. So it comes out that Chur had Mesiras Nefesh for V'shachanti B'Seicham, and therefore his grandson, Betzalel, was Moser Nafshe. He had Mesiras Nefesh for the Melechas Aron, where by the Aron, that's where there was the main Gilui of V'shachanti B'Seicham. Since Betzalel got this Mesiras Nefesh from his grandfather Chur, so therefore the above idea that we said earlier about the koyach of Mesiras Nefesh being above all the other koyachs of a person, and ultimately its goal is to go into those koyachs. So this above idea is also hinted to in the name Betzalel, his father's name and his grandfather's name. So it's Betzalel ben Uri ben Achor. So Uri is related to the word Ur, which refers either to Zah or Chachma, which is the beginning of the 10 spheres. And Chur is related to the word Nekev. Chur is a whole and Nekev is a whole, which is the Nukva, because Nekev is like Nukva, the sphere of Malchus, which is the last of all the levels of the spheres. And then we have Betzalel, which Betzalel is Betzel Kel, which is a level above these others. Since Kel is Chesed, or Kel is entirely higher than Zon, Malchus, and all the 10 spheres. Since Kel is the first name of the Yud Gimel Midas Rachmim, and certainly Tzel Kel is above all of the spheres, since Tzel Kel means it's the Makif of Kel. And this fits with the above idea that the koich of Mesiras Nefesh is above all the koiches of a person, both the koiches makifim and the koiches pnimim, which when we're talking about the relationship to the worlds, so Malchus, which you said is connected to Chor, is the koiches pnimim, and Zo, which is connected to Uri, is considered makifim relative to its relationship to the world. And so this fits with the above idea that the koich of Mesiras Nefesh is above all the koiches, both the makifim and the pnimim, and it draws down from the level of Keser. And now we could also understand why Moshe commanded Betzalel to first make the Kalim and only afterwards the Mishkan. And Betzalel first made the Mishkan and only afterwards the Kalim. Since the level of Betzalel is above Makifim and Pnimim, and on that level that's above the Makifim and Pnimim, there the Pnimim are higher than the Makifim. So therefore Moshe wanted him to first make the Kalim, which are Pnimim, and afterwards the Mishkan, which is Makifim. Since Betzalel comes from a level that's above Pnimim and Makifim, and on that level, the Pnimim are higher than the Makifim. However, Betzalel said that even though this is his level, nevertheless, until one reaches this level, he must rise up from level to level and work through a regular Seder, and in that path, first the person must draw down the Makifim, and then the Makifim have an effect on the Pnimim. And so therefore, Betzalel said to first build the Mishkan, and only afterwards make the Kalim.